Welcome back, everybody. This is the ISA Insider News. My name's Max Tim, and as always, we have Shayna Weber with us.
Oh, he introduced me today. Hello, Max Tim. How are you?
Try to shift it up. Just take the words right out of your mouth instead of just waiting for you to say them. That's the right male thing to do, right?
I guess. How are you? What's going on?
A lot and not a whole lot. You know, there was a lot of TV watching over the past week, and just a ton of work all the time. You know.
Yeah.
What about you?
Had a pretty good weekend. I'm prepping to shoot a short film this
That's
coming
right.
weekend. So it's a little bit crazy and running around and, trying to figure out things and panicking, but then not panicking. And so
Yeah.
finding crew and losing locations and finding new places.
And you
So
had to go to San
it's
Diego
fun.
to do the research, right?
Yeah, I did a scout where we're filming. That
Yeah.
was great. So yeah, it's gonna be exciting.
I think it's great that you're doing that. I should get a little fire under me. I'm so terrible when it, and this goes into one of the topics that we're going to talk about today, where I'm too precious with ideas. Once I have the idea, I'm all in. But at the concept portion of figuring things out, I'm way too particular, and I just shut down too quickly. And you just go with the idea and see what happens. And it's been
Well,
ages since I shot a short film.
the good and bad news about this one is that there is a reason for the us just going for it. Our friend Kent, who wrote this and is starring in it, and it's about him, he has been talking about doing a short for years, this
Yeah.
short. And he had a health scare about a year and a half ago. And so he's fine now, but honestly, you just don't know how long you have. So it's like, let's do this. Let's do it now. Let's get
Yeah.
this thing done. And so there was a lot of urgency in that way of just like, well, we got to do it. We got to do it now. We're going to go do it. Let's go do it. So it's going to be really cool. And I'm very excited to shoot from his perspective. He's 3'11". He has a condition. It's brittle bone disease. So he's broken like 100 bones
Oof.
in his life. Yeah. So it's going to be really cool. We're shifting perspective down to a 3'11" person who a day in the life of like what his day is like, what his viewpoint is. He looks at butts all day. So the short is called Butts.
I love it. I can't wait to see it. I think it's going to be great. We'll get into our top headline.
Top headline this week comes from the Hollywood Reporter, and it is David Zaslav's Hollywood Doctrine. Make sure we get paid.
It pretty much says it all. This is another one of those articles, everybody, for all of you screenwriters out there. We're trying to make it normal for the writers in the world to be paying attention to the business side of the industry. And I think this article pretty much hits the nail on the head as far as proving how much of a true business Hollywood, quote unquote, really is. It's a heavy one to read because there's a lot of that business talk again, although they don't get into heavy like market reports and everything, but they do have this little graph that, Zaslav's axe falls at Warner Brothers Discovery, and they're talking about how much money they're kind of trying to sweep off the deck and write off for tax purposes and things. And on one hand, I think it's positive that Zaslav is taking this type of approach where he's like, look, we've got to, be careful with spending, et cetera, et cetera. On the other side of it, though, this is every creative's nightmare.
Right.
So it's what bothers me really is the last set of lines here, where they're talking to an analyst who is a financial analyst who works at some form of a hedge fund, probably, some kind of a major firm. There are analysts everywhere. This person says the fact that WBD, Warner Brothers Discovery management, is so clearly laser focused on managing the business for free cash flow generation, I'll explain what that means, for free cash flow generation over the long term will only make shares more attractive to value-oriented investors. And he goes on to say, particularly compared to other media names that still seem somewhat unsure about whether top-line growth or bottom-line performance is the most important metric. And that when I read things like that, you don't really even have to read between the lines. It just makes my brain shake and my heart, sink, because it just is a hard reminder that, of course, bottom line performance is what the industry cares about, especially today. Since the late 90s, really, when corporate America took, and I shouldn't say took over, but in a lot of ways rightly took over the industry, because the spending in the 90s and prior to that was just insane. They would drop millions of dollars on a script and just put it on the shelf. But what they're talking about here in terms of what Warner Brothers Discovery is trying to do is this free cash flow generation. What they want to do is eliminate their debt and not be trying to, basically, I'm dumbing this down a lot, create content based on debt. In other words, borrowing money to make projects, which of course, like from a basic financial model, that makes sense. And it's great that they're trying to do that. But they're trying to do that, and this could be, arguable. They're trying to do that to attract more value-oriented investors. It just kills me. They're not doing it because they want to try to create great content. A lot of people in the industry side, on the business side of the industry, will probably be like, hold on. Of course, they're still interested on the creative side. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing this. But like you were saying before, Shayna, about why all of the IP is so important. Right? What were you saying?
They don't want the risk. And so when this notion came in where, well, we don't have to risk because we can go take a project that's based on existing IP, like a book that's been successful or even an article, then we take that and we build that into a movie. And then the risk is lower. So I feel like it's all risk related. And the same way that Netflix is changing their mandate to bring in huge stars who bring in viewers. I feel like this is sort of the same way, even though they're saying they're going to be like the anti-Netflix. It's still about big money, big names, big draw so that you make your money. So it just feels like the smaller, more independent productions are falling away faster and faster.
Yeah, they're looking to be creating much stronger of a theatrical distribution model in terms of Warner Brothers Discovery. They're going to be combining content between Discovery Plus and HBO Max, which we've mentioned in prior broadcasts before. I don't know. We could go into a lot more, breakdown of all of this, but from a writing standpoint, what can writers do about this? In a lot of ways, not much. You have to be writing what you love and what you're inspired to write. Like that bottom line for us is that's what it's about. At the same time, if you can combine something in terms of, I want to write something that I'm creatively inspired by and I love, with the opportunity of showing that there's IP connected, even if you are the IP. That's one thing Felicity Wren tells her development slate writers all the time. She's with the ISA. That you need to be building yourself as a brand. Write as much as you can. Create a blog. Try to write for Huffington Post, or just try to gain followers in whatever way you can through your writing, and then suddenly you become a little bit of an IP, because the industry wants a sure shot, and there's no such thing. But the more of a sure shot you can be, more of a chance you're going to have. And so, like you're saying, if you can find something that's based on an article or this old wild story that's true, or there are ways that you can still remain creative.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing that I do respect a lot from what they're doing is I do like that they are thinking about theatrical. And back in the day when there was Blockbuster and video sales, now it's just shifting from theatrical first and then streaming. So instead of theatrical to sale DVD to rental, now it's, probably the opposite. It's theatrical to rental to streaming. On a streaming thing. So I feel like at least maybe that's going to be a way that if they make enough money with the really big projects, maybe then they will end up having a surplus, and then they can put some money into some more like independent, smaller productions.
Yeah, right.
Looked on the bright side.
Yeah. So take a look at the article. It's an important one to read. We want to be just up to speed, what's happening. I receive probably 7 or 8 emails from the Hollywood Reporter every day saying breaking, and they just send you articles. And I don't know how or why I'm receiving them. I just suddenly started getting them. I don't think I pay for the Hollywood Reporter, but there are ways to keep on top of these things. But
Like
So
going to ISA Insider News
totally
every
perfect
day.
segue. Perfect segue, because that's where we're going next this week in the ISA Insiders.
Speaking of wounds, because Max has some wounds about this, our top headline. We pulled 2 articles from ISA News. One is in the ISA articles page, revealing your hero's wound, and this is written by consultant Michael Haig.
Yeah, Michael's great. He's a longtime consultant. He's worked with Will Smith, and I've interviewed him a bunch of times. We've had him on panels, and he's just a wonderful man, really smart, and he really gets that hero's journey model. And so what he's talking about here is what you need to be doing, or what you could be doing. We'll try to steer away from the word need, because I think that's a hot topic that Shayna and I are going to be covering, about how to present your character in a way that allows an arc and allows an evolution.
That's a good point. So what he's using in this article as an example is the wonderful film Good Will Hunting. And it really sort of breaks down both Will and Sean, played by Robin Williams, their emotional arcs, and sort of like where they are at the beginning and where they go at the end. And it's a great example if your screenplay is in that same vein of somebody who is hiding or keeping a real life from happening, or stuck, something like that at the beginning. It doesn't mean you have to have your character like that, but this is a very good example of if your script is in this sort of like realm. It's a great example of tips and tricks that you can pull out.
Yeah, it's so important to be aware of the type of project that you have and that you're writing, because not every script has, or not every story in general, whether it's a screenplay or not, has a character like a Will Hunting who has very serious, deep flaws that he needs to get over. And then by the end, he's not 180 degrees different, but he's quite a bit different. He's learned a lot, and he's changed a lot, but you don't need to have that character do that. You don't need Marlin from Finding Nemo every single movie. Look at even Marty McFly in Back to the Future. He changes a little bit, like he has some little insights because he sees himself in his dad, but that movie doesn't need that. That movie isn't about Marty changing through this crazy, wild, adventure. It's about the crazy, wild adventure. And so I think making sure that you spend time on your concepts, so you understand the type of character that should be living within it. That's why you really need to be reading these articles with a particular eye, not one that you're being like cynical, because what Michael's saying here is dead on as far as Will Hunting is concerned. We just don't want to be necessarily creating this as a formula for every single story ever.
Right. And that leads us into our second article.
It does.
Which is by Corey Mandel, who's another consultant. And it's an interesting article titled Why Story Structure Formulas Don't Work. And that's a little bit of clickbait of going, what?
Yeah.
And then you want to read it. But it is full of good information. And it's sort of like a story about somebody who came to him for consulting and was really stuck on this idea that it had to follow very specific page numbers for plot points, and specifically the inciting incident, which they put on page 17. Okay. And so it's just telling that tale of like why that didn't work, and how that's stifling this writer in terms of her creativity, that you don't need to follow this structure that maybe you've read in a book or a famous, screenwriting help book or something like that. So
yeah, I agree with Corey. And Corey's another top consultant. He's been around for a long time, and we've had him at various events, and he's great. He kind of touts this idea, like a big part of his brand is to not just follow formula. He doesn't believe in formula at all. The hard thing for me to talk about here, though, when mentioning that idea of there's no formula, is that of course there's a formula. There's a formula to every story. It doesn't have to follow an exact page reference. And that's what Corey is really talking about here. He mentions when I was in film school, we were told this inciting incident should happen between pages 15 and 20. Nowadays, maybe attention spans are shorter, so it could happen around 10 to 17. Please don't make sure that you absolutely perfectly have to follow a page count. That's the hard thing, because that's what this one writer that he was mentioning had a problem with, that she was writing beautifully up until page 17, and suddenly she forced this inciting incident in. What I like,
and she's probably following the 120 page rule of a screenplay that doesn't apply. And, you know, so yeah, you gotta, for me, you gotta learn the rules so you can not follow the rules. You have to know that there are some rules that you can break. Doesn't mean that you have to follow everything like, oh my God, no. And this idea that a reader is going to flip to page 10 or flip to page 17 to find your inciting incident, and if it's not there, they're going to throw it away. Right. That is like, no. If they do that, then
right, that they're not stretching their brain enough. I try to give it a different term. I call it a setup event instead of inciting incident, because there are multiple inciting incidents that happen throughout most stories. Like the example he gives about The Godfather, there are so many inciting incidents that happen almost every scene. Back to the Future is the same way. It's like a new twist. This incites this makes this person make this decision. So inciting incidents, I think, a little too general of a term. Not that setup event is perfect by any means, but at least it's referencing setup. You're setting up the second act.
I kind of call it the kickoff.
Yeah, right.
Like I always think of it as like the thing that kicks it all off, of like you're getting to know them and then something happens that really sort of like sets everything in motion.
Right.
For that first. But that can happen multiple times. You're right.
There are twists and turns throughout the whole story. I think as long as you understand that every story, and I hate using those blanket terms like every single story or all of the above kind of thing, but generally speaking, every story is a character-driven story. But you don't really have to worry too much about page count structure, as if you're making sure there's a powerful enough kind of feeling in the audience's heart for the character. If we connect to that person early enough, When Harry Met Sally is a perfect example, and this is what Corey Mandel's kind of talking about. He references When Harry Met Sally as one of the examples. We like Harry and Sally so much throughout the early parts of the script that we're not really caring so much about formula. We're just following this interesting, kind of trajectory of their lives. But there was something I mentioned in my writing group recently, about more an emotional structure than a logistical one. And I said, a character-driven story is not just a story that's fueled by the choices the main character makes. Yes, a story is altered because of those choices, but a character-driven story is a story about how the choices the main character makes evolves and changes the character. So you start to see that this character makes a choice that changes that person. Like it's not just a plot-based choice that they're making. And then suddenly you're not really even thinking about structure anymore. It's just a flow of emotion. Both of those articles, totally worth reading. We need to be keeping kind of a critical eye on anytime any consultant, myself included, Shayna included, when we say this is what you should do, we should say it differently. We should say you could do this, because there are no shoulds and needs in every time, type of terms in something creative like this. But so there you have it. What are we watching?
I'm pulling from what you just said. Something made me think of, on Disney Plus, they have this show called Bluey, and it's a kids show, and it's about a cartoon family of dogs in Australia, and it's epic. It is the most current kids animated show that there is, in terms of like, if you want to write kids animated shows, watch Bluey and study it, because it's damn near perfect. It's insane. So I watched entire season 3 of Bluey, which in Australia it's not new, but it takes forever for it to get here. So when I see my friends in Australia going, "Oh, new Bluey," I'm like, "What?" But I mean, it's epic. And watched all of season 3 with my kid and laughed, and I think me and my husband laughed more than Max did, but it gives you the giggles. It's great. But I finished watching Sandman. Then I also watched Day Shift on Netflix, starring Jamie Foxx, and it's about a vampire hunter who obviously has the day shift of hunting vampires.
That's already cool.
It's a really good fresh take on vampire stories, and I always appreciate a fresh take on vampire stories. And then I also watched the pilot of A League of Their Own, the Amazon series.
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty close in terms of what we're watching. Yeah. I finished Sandman. I also watched the first, I think it's 3 or 4 episodes of League of Their Own. I have not seen Day Shift, although that sounds like I need to be watching at least one movie a week because it's so easy to watch TV shows. But I have to be watching at least one. And Day Shift sounds pretty good. But then I'm still continuing with Only Murders in the Building. It's just so fun. It's just like candy, you know. And then I binged the whole new season of Lock and Key. It's season 3 on Netflix. And it's so cheesy and not good. But I think
I was gonna watch it and now I'm not.
It's totally worth watching the first season if you haven't watched it at all.
It was a little scary.
It's a little spooky, but it's not at all.
And so I'll have to watch it by myself, not with a kid, but
yeah, it might be a little old for Max, but mainly because he probably won't really be able to follow exactly what's happening. However, the reason I'm continuing with it because the concept is just so great, and it's based on a graphic novel series, I think. And it's this big, huge, gorgeous house where keys have been made that you can use them in certain items, including yourself, like you put in your neck or whatever. And it gives you certain abilities, and the abilities are just so fun and creative. That it's just like, yeah, I just want to keep watching these people do this. Like at the end of this 3rd season is the end of the series. Like this ends it. And I kind of felt like I want to keep watching them play with these keys. This is, in terms of, as far as the relationship storylines, is, it's really kind of cheeserific, but it was fun. But Sandman, how did you feel about?
I loved how it got darker and darker. I felt like the beginning they were like, of the series, they were easing into it a little bit. I felt like they made things a little less dark, and then they let it go darker and darker and darker. I really loved it. And I loved that the way that they ended the first season and leading you into knowing but not knowing what season 2 will be. I mean, I loved it. I thought it was amazingly great fun and visually just gorgeous.
I loved every second of it. Pretty much everything you just said. I think the one realization I had, because there are at least 2 episodes, maybe 3, but at least 2 that really don't have any, I shouldn't say not anything, but have very little to do with the Sandman and or his storyline. And the 2 that I'm talking about are the one with Death, not Lucifer, the Satan, but Death. And then the other one where the actor from Harry Potter, I can't remember his name, is in the diner.
In the diner,
both those episodes were so fabulous, and halfway through I'm like, this really doesn't even have anything to do with Sandman. But then when I was done with
it does, because it does have to do with when you get further into the saga of the relationships of the endless and desire and despair and death and all of those people interacting.
What I realized afterwards. I'm like, you know what, this is a little bit about how it's technically a story about Dream learning what it's like to be human, even though he's never going to be human, but then he's going to use that to be a better Dream Lord. I was like, this is amazing. It's just fantastic.
I loved it. In terms of A League of Their Own, the reason I started watching it was because I read a lot of comments on Twitter how much people were loving it. So I was like, well, I better watch it, because I like, the movie was a great movie. I wouldn't say it was like one of my favorite movies, but I very much enjoyed it. I thought it was wonderful. And so watching the pilot, I have to be honest and tell you I was underwhelmed. I appreciate what they're doing with it, but I feel like it veered off course for me, and it went heavily into queer relationships with, it seemed like all, if not most, of the women. And I'm trying to be as PC, because I'm not trying to offend or anything. I'm just talking about story wise. It felt like it really leaned in that direction and forgot that it was also the story about women playing baseball, and that sort of epic shift in America at that time of, entertainment, when men were at war and women were jumping into these things and finding their voice. And so I'll watch a few more, and maybe maybe I'll get into it. But I also didn't feel like there were any surprises in the pilot. I didn't feel like there was anything that I didn't already know within the first 5 minutes. It didn't feel very I didn't feel at the end like, oh, I can't wait to watch more episodes.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I agree with all of that. I don't even know how much I would add. I try to tell my writers when I'm working with them, as screenwriters watching stuff on TV or watching a movie, when we're trying to analyze it, we can't rely on our likes or dislikes of the project based on things like acting and photography and sound. Like we don't really have much say on that. It's great to acknowledge it, but we need to be focusing on story. So everything you're saying, I just agree. Like the storylines after a while were just like, I don't really. It's funny how it turned way more character driven, and there was no real plot. Like there was just these characters going through relationships, which is fine. There's what carries it for me in terms of my entertainment just value is I think all of the actors are doing a really great job. And like there are some moments that I laughed out loud. The acting I thought was just fabulous. And
great cast,
costumes and the throwback, it's great. But you're right, where the hell's the baseball? I will say I love Nick Offerman. Every moment he's on screen, I'm missing Tom Hanks.
I don't think he's in the pilot because they didn't even get to practicing or anything in the pilot.
You're right.
It was just the tryouts.
He comes in the second episode, I think.
So he's the Tom Hanks character.
He's the Tom Hanks coach. Yeah.
Okay.
It doesn't.
Yeah, I like him too, but interesting. Well, we'd love to hear your thoughts if you've seen it, what you like about it, if I should keep watching it, what else you're watching, what we should be watching, what we should not be watching. Put some comments.
Let's get into our next segment here. It's kind of fun that we're taking a little more time with our segments this time around, and I think it's because all of these are so particularly important to writers. But yeah, we'll get into Twitter question time here. So the question, it's really more about a topic, but I guess the question would be, do you believe in writer's block? That's kind of what we're going to be chatting about.
I will answer with Neil Gaiman's answer.
Okay.
Yeah. Neil Gaiman says, I don't really believe in writer's block, but I absolutely believe in getting stuck. The difference is one is imposed to you by the gods and one is your own damn fault. I just love that. I was like, well, so true. Geez, why don't you attack me here?
It's so true. The reason we're bringing it up is because Tanya Bhattacharya is another consultant educator, but she's also executive producer and writer on many, many shows. Old friend of mine. She was my very first out of college screenwriting instructor. She's awesome. But she posted this tweet saying it's about putting in the time, 10,000 hours, treating writing like a job. Writer's block happens when you don't trust the process, or you're trying to be perfect. Some days are good, some are bad. And so it's just a topic that she was bringing up. And I agree with her. But at the same time, I come from this mentality that Neil Gaiman is talking about, that I would argue writer's block doesn't actually exist. It's all you creating a block in yourself. And I don't even think it has anything to do with the project.
Yeah, I really like Neil goes on he talks about writer's block a lot. If you want to Google like Neil Gaiman writer's block, you can read about all the stuff. But basically his advice is go do something else. Go feed your chickens, go for a run, take a shower, come back to your project pretending that you've never read it before. And this is the most interesting part that I actually did learn from Neil Gaiman, that when like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Very often it's not where you think you're stuck that you're actually stuck. It's a few steps prior to where you're stuck that you actually went off the rails, went down a wrong path, went down the wrong rabbit hole, and you need to sort of turn around, back it up. And if you can read it with fresh eyes, like you've never read it, you may find that spot earlier than where you're stuck and where you can sort of fix what's going on. For me, when I have writer's block, it's usually because I don't like where my story is going and I've gone too far past that point. And I really just have to like back it all the way up.
Yeah. I mean, I have arguably been in a state of writer's block on my second book for about 5 years. But it's because I have other things going on in my life, and the difficulty is just sitting down to write. Like I don't even call it a block. I'm just not doing it. Nothing's actually blocking me. And I think that's one thing to think about writer's block. Like when you call it writer's block, it's as if it's this outside source that you're not responsible for, and you are, but then as far as what Gaiman's saying, getting stuck. Like I am in a spot in my second book where I've almost literally written my characters into a corner of the woods, like literally in the scene. And I'm like, I don't know, I don't know what I'm going to do to get them out of there. But you're right. As far as it's probably not that moment that I have to figure out. There's some things prior to that needs to be worked out. Famous Terry Pratchett, who was friend of Neil Gaiman's, said, "There's no such thing as writer's block. That was invented by people in California who couldn't write." So there you have it. There you have it. Let us know what you think about writer's block. Put it in the YouTube comments. Do you get it? How do you get over it? Do you believe in it? Do you not? There's no right or wrong answer.
Give your solutions.
Right. Moving on to the final segment, good news of the week. We highly suggest that you watch this little video.
It will restore your faith in humanity. A little league player was hit by a pitch in the side of his head, and he fell to the ground. He's fine. He got up, went to first base, and the pitcher was still having a hard time. He hit somebody with the ball, probably like feeling very bad. That player who got hit walked, it's going to make me choke up, but that player walked over took a timeout, walked over to the pitcher's mound and gave that player a hug and said, "It's okay, I'm fine."
Gave the pitcher
pitch. And the coach had a mic on, so you kind of get to hear a little bit. It's just such a wonderful display of, like, for young men and young people, of there is goodness still out there. It's not all the bad news. You gotta look at the goodness.
Especially for young men in general, regardless of age. Because playing Little League, like I was a serious baseball player as a kid, and watching that, watching it now, I was immediately like, "Ooh, God, I hope the kid's all right." But that's where it ended. I didn't go to how do you react after that, because I, as a kid, probably would have reacted with instinct. And I probably would have been angry. And I don't think I would have rushed it. I mean, it's Little League. I'm not going to go beat up the kid, but I probably would have been pretty pissed. And then at first base, seeing that kid react that way, I'm not that I'm proud to say it. I probably would have been like, good. I probably would have reacted that way.
Such male energy.
That's what I mean. And so I think it's very healthy and positive to see that kid reacts in that way. Because especially in a Little League scenario where these kids are still learning about things and not just the sport, but who they are,
and that's good coaching right there. Like, that's coming from their coaches and
parents,
parents, and how that they're, how they're taught to deal with things like that. And just amazing.
I guess just to speak from experience, this is the reverse of it, but I was pitching in a game. It was Little League, and this kid hit a really hard line drive right back at me, and I lucked out by putting my hand right in my front of my face, and the ball hit my hand. It would have hit right in my face, and the adrenaline went through me so much, and I got so angry that I went and tried to get the ball, pick it up, and throw it to first, and I threw the ball away. And so the guy ended up running all the way to third base. Had I just had the wherewithal to settle my brain and be like, all right, just relax. And this is what my dad, who was the coach at the time, said. You need to just kind of, you sit in the moment a little bit. But it's anyway, we're just repeating ourselves. It's good to see kids react that way, and hopefully we all can.
It's good to see empathy.
Yeah.
It's nice.
So on that note, we all empathize with you for having to sit with us this entire time. Hopefully,
you love it.
Hopefully it was enjoyable. But any last words of comfort or advice?
Next time I see you all, I will have shot my short film, and I'm probably going to be tired. So get ready for that.
You're going to do this coming week?
This weekend. Yep. This coming weekend.
Amazing. All right. Well, best of luck there. Is it okay to say break a leg or good luck?
Yeah, that's good luck. Yep.
Good luck. All right. Well, good luck to Shayna. Good luck to everybody. Don't let writer's block fool you. And you'll see us all next week.
Bye, everyone.